Hi, my name is Amanda Beggs, and I want to welcome you all to the Cinema Audio Society YouTube channel. I am so excited to be here today with the 57th annual CAS award winning re recording mixer, Carlos Cortez. Carlos was a part of the post team for the incredible film Sound of Metal. Carlos, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
Hi, thanks for the space and the interview.
Absolutely. So essentially, I just wanted to start off. One of the things we're trying to do with this YouTube channel is provide education not only to our own members, but to the general public as well. So your title was re recording mixer. I'd love it if you could just give a sort of basic overview of what your job entails, just the sort of elevator pitch, if you will, of what it means to be a re recording mixer.
Okay. Well, what this means is that once that the sound elements have been gathered by the sound supervisor, meaning that they already have all the recorded elements from the production and the added elements afterwards, let's say Foley or music or any other elements. We gather those elements and we start mixing them and combining them in texture, in space, and in as an overall volume. So the idea behind this is to create concepts with all the different elements and try out different layouts to see how the overall pacing of the movie would work.
That's
That's a
that's
general.
awesome. Yeah, I know there's always more nuance, but it's a good sort of overview. So how did you get into this line of work? How did you get into this business?
Well, I studied in the US at the recording workshop back in 2003, I think it was. And then I came back to Mexico. And when I studied it back in the US, I was amazed by the potential of 5.1 mix. And I started mixing music in 5.1. But once I got back into Mexico, I saw that also the potential could be used in cinema. So eventually I started working in a different studio, which is called Labo Digital. I was also in a part of building it and designing it with a whole other team. But from there, I got that experience and later on moved to the studio I work now. It's Splendor Omnia, and also had that chance and the opportunity to design it and think about the overall workflow. And that made me expand the possibilities of trying to get different workflows from different studios. And that's how somehow I started. And I've been working on this, I think, since 2007, 8, something like that. Mhm.
That's awesome. That's incredible. You've worked with your fellow re-recording mixers that worked on Sound of Metal. You guys have worked together before, correct?
Yes, and after we've done a couple of movies after. We did. We met before, but the first time we got the opportunity to work was in 2016, I believe it was, or 17. But when we really had the chance to make the team work as we are working now, because Jaime and Michelle work in a different studio in Mexico City, so every now and then we get together and it's been very interesting because we tend to simulate and think about our workflows, and eventually we get to a point where we mix them somehow and start a new workflow because each one has its own particular way of working. But it's been great because you learn from the others and you grow. So and then back in 2018, I think it was, the owner of the studio, Carlos Reigadas, which is a well-known director in other countries, we mixed his film, which was called Our Time. And from there, every now and then, when we can, we gather the team. And after that, after Sound of Metal, we did another. Last it was it was yeah last year, like back in November, we had the opportunity to do the same team and do the same workflow for John and the Hole. I think
Right.
it's gonna be released in August, I believe.
I was looking into that one. Yeah, it looks really
Mhm.
interesting. That's awesome. It's nice to find that team where you have, that history, so you guys know how to communicate. You have that good working dynamic. That has to be really incredible to have that kind of, at this point, you guys have a lot of experience in history together, so that has to be awesome.
Yeah, it's great for me because I usually work alone, and although it's very intense because each one has its own line of thought, we tend to communicate really well, and we're really open. So I think once we established the workflow, it was very smooth to work with them because each one is allowed to portray their idea, and then we discuss it, and then if we don't like it, we go back, or we tend to do a lot of experiments, and usually I'm the first one to get in the mix, and later on they catch up and they start pouring their ideas into the mix. So I think that's also great because once you get to a point, you can see that the panorama can expand in many different directions, and then you get new ideas, and so it starts like a feedback moving on.
That's awesome. I'd love to just get right into too. I mean, the sound design. I mean, the sort of soundscape of this movie really was such an integral part to the story, right? I mean, you get really in the head of the main character, in a way that I don't know that any other. I mean, this isn't how every movie works, right? But in this case, sound was such an integral part. So I have to imagine. I mean, for me, it feels like that would be the dream, right? I mean, you are such an important and integral part of the storytelling process. What was that like to get to work on a movie where the sound was almost a character? I mean, it feels kind of maybe cliche to say, but we really get to feel the pain, the loss of sound when things cut out. The soundscape starts very specific. There's those close-up shots of, the coffee maker, and you hear the bugs outside. And when that's taken away from you as an audience member, you really feel it. What was that like to get to work on a project where, I mean, you're telling the story in a way that, not every movie gets to do through sound. What was that like?
I mean, it was great and overwhelming at the same time because we had a lot of elements to play around, and Darius and Nico are really they're great in that sense. They allow you to express, and also yourself. So if I had an idea, I would go to Nico and say, "Hey, can I try this?" "Yeah, yeah, go ahead," he would say, and then I would try, and they say, "Oh, now I have this other idea," or maybe he would go like, "No, let's go back." But in that sense, we would be so free, and we could experiment in a lot of ways. So that's why I really liked about this as well, because we had also these all these elements that Nico and Philip got together. They had contact microphones into to the main character, into Reese. They had hydrophones into his mouth. So we would get all this palette of sounds, and such a variety of different elements to work in with, that we were able to make that more sensorial, and they were like real elements rather than processed elements. So I think that also gave it a, a difference because it's so sensorial in a way that the senses gather. Because if you listen to the contact mic and as a like a real high definition recording, you would say no, this won't work. But for that specific moment, or for that uh, purpose, it worked perfectly, instead of just filtering some sound, or all those elements helped out to create this this character. Let's put it that way. But I think it was also great that they allow us to be part of the process in such a way that each one can contribute in their specific moment to different ideas. So that's also, I think, one of the beauties of this team, that it was very free and very respectful, and at the same time very responsible on each decision. And I think it has also has to do a lot with the pacing. When I found out that Mikkel, the editor, is a drummer, then I understood why also it felt like really natural to to come from one place to another, but like in a very, I would just say, like subtle way, from loudness to silence. So I think that's also portrayed in a lot of ways through the pacing of the movie, with the elements and with the actors and everything. I think that's also why it held so tight as a whole structure.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, that's incredible. I didn't know that the editor was a drummer. That is really interesting. I'm sure that definitely brought something, like you said, to the pacing. That makes total sense. You mentioned Philip, and you mentioned all the microphones that were used. I'm a production sound mixer, as well. Same job that Philip has, and so that was one of my questions. Is was there a conversation while the movie was being shot about, did you have any requests for the production sound mixer? Is that something, is that dialogue something that you guys had, or is that something you try to have on movies? I know there's shows that I've done where I've actually gotten requests from the post sound team. Hey, we'd love it if you could get, this list of sound effects, or if you could get a stereo recording of the space and what it sounds like. So did you guys have that conversation with Philip, or was it more just that he was just trying to provide you with everything, or how did that relationship work with production?
Honestly, that was more Philip and Nico, because that was before we were even in the picture.
Sure.
So, but I think it has a lot to do with that. This script has been working on for, I think Abe and Darius were working on this script for 10 years. So they had a really clear picture. And I think like around a year and a half or 2 years before it was shot, the film was shot, Nico and Darius got together and they started talking about all this. So I think this created, before even it was shot, the universe, and Nico started thinking about these other ideas. Then afterwards, Philip executed them, and we got all these different elements. So I guess it has to do also about how it was thought, because Darius also in that sense was great. He would allow us to do whatever he wanted, but he already had established some of the ideas with Nico, so we had the elements to work with. So I think it was important that it came from the very beginning, I guess.
I mean, that makes absolute sense. I don't think you go into a movie like this not already considering the sound design, just because, like you said. I mean, the story is so, like, hinges upon that sort of element of going through the experience, with the main character. So that's awesome that Philip got to be on board. I guess that you guys it seems like you got sent a wealth of things to play with, and like you said, it's maybe things that you wouldn't necessarily use in like a high def situation, but it's that really gritty production track that you're getting that you can work with. It's better than maybe just, like you said, running something through filters, or trying to recreate something after the fact. That's awesome.
I think even Nico was, sorry to interrupt. I think
No, no, no.
even Nico was in the production some days. I mean, a few days,
Sure.
but they were together, and he was involved at that time as well. So that also helped him to
Absolutely.
understand, because he wanted to listen to how, I don't know if it's, I mean, when wherever it was shot, he wanted to listen how it sounded, how the house creaks, and all those elements. It was very important for him to understand, in order to ask Philip to get all those elements. So
Which is awesome. I mean, I have to tell you, like I said, as a production sound mixer, being able to have that dialogue, whether it be the designer, or even some of his editors, depending on when, obviously re-recording mixers join a project. I mean, it's invaluable, because all we want to do is give you the things that you need, give you, options and choices, and to be able to have that discussion in advance is really incredible. So I love that this movie provided that, really bridging that gap between post and production, which is really awesome.
no,
Yeah.
and this, I think this also made me realize how important, as you said before, like what what are the elements that we could ask for, and to establish a communication between the post production phase and the production phase. So maybe we have a crazy idea, and we can ask for it, or vice versa. So you can, but as long as we have the elements, it's gonna be easier.
Absolutely. One thing that I thought was really, really interesting was the cochlear implants, the sound when he gets the implants put in. I'm just wondering how much research was that you guys, was that Nicholas, like was there a lot of research to be done about what that actually, sounds like to a deaf person when they're given those implants? Because it's such a very, very interesting, very specific sound. It's not like you pop on those implants and you're hearing what a person who's able to hear. It's not the same experience. So I'm just curious what sort of research went into that, and what that was like to build that sort of soundscape for when he puts on those implants.
There was definitely a lot of research as well, because as far as I understand, the inspiration of this story was because I'm not sure if it was Darius' grandmother or aunt that had a similar situation, and from there, Darius started interviewing people with that condition, let's say, and how it was perceived and how it happened. So at the same time, when Nico stepped in, I think the IRCAM had also a lot to do how to translate some of that hearing, that neurological hearing, because it's more like an impulse, as far as I understand, and how it would translate it to our threshold, to the, let's say, the normal threshold. So in that sense, there are they even showed us some of those translations, and it would sound very metallic, very edgy, very high pitched, and that's how it was perceived from what we understood from people who were in that situation. And it was from people who never had the opportunity to listen to people who had lost the hearing, and how it was perceived through those implants. So it's very different from one who has the perception of hearing in a good shape, and afterwards you lose it, than someone who doesn't have uh, a reference. So in order to make that, also a lot of the interviewing, they were also saying about. I remember one night talking to Darius. He told me about how some people tend to even disconnect it when there's a lot of people, or a lot of environment surrounding, because it can be overwhelming. So it was easier to just disconnect, and that's something we wanted to portray in the party when he goes back to Belgium. And that's where all the inspiration came from those references. Obviously, we don't really know what how it sounds, but as far as we understood, and from the interpretations and from all these interviews, that's the information we gather, and that was our approach.
I mean, that scene, the scene you described, the party scene, yeah, it was incredible. Just the sort of overwhelming cacophony. I mean, it was really sort of, it sort of induces almost an anxiety, because it's so overwhelming, and it's hard for us as an audience member to pick out the sort of individual elements that, a hearing person obviously can very clearly be like, oh, there's the piano, that's someone clapping, this is singing. It sort of all kind of meshes together in the same kind of, frequency, almost, where everything kind of sounds the same and identical. It was really incredible. I mean, what was it like? I mean, yeah, so for that scene in particular, I guess we can chat about that. I mean, what was your sort of role in that scene, and what was it like to sort of put that all together? And when you guys kind of felt like you nailed it, what did that feel like as well?
That was a hard one, actually, because what we were trying to do is to disorient, really. I mean, to have the perception be really confusing, and we tried spanning all the sound from coming from everywhere. But in the end, what I think it worked the most, it was to space out things in the totally opposite way. So if it came from not only on the opposite way, but like with a lot of divergence and a movement of all the elements, because we would gather groups of elements and then start moving them around, but in the opposite direction, but also in a circular direction. And that was a lot of work to handle. But the idea behind it was really make you feel that you could not connect the sound source. You could not really tell where it was because it was so disorienting. It was moving in a particular way that, since it was moving not all the time, but in a very specific, even counter, and in a counter, how would you say, counter, the opposite way, it would really, really disorient you. So that was a tough one. At first, we tried putting out everything everywhere, and it kind of felt that it would work, but eventually we went to that, which is a little bit more towards the effects movement, and I think it worked out.
I mean, true. I mean, the way you disorienting is a perfect way to describe that, which I think again just serves the story so well. I mean, it can sound cool, but you want it to help further the story a lot. You know, you want it to be helping the director's vision achieve what they want. And I feel like that's such a good way to describe it as disorienting. You really, man, you feel for him so much because you can understand how jarring that must be to be in a room to music is playing, music that's been your life, and that's how you experience it now. I mean, that was such an emotional scene. So I feel like you guys absolutely nailed it.
Thank you, thank you.
So I wanted to jump into that because you talk about sort of placing things sort of in a space, and this is where I'll admit that my knowledge is definitely not the best. But was this something? Were you guys mixing in 5.1? Like when you say dropping things in space, what do you sort of mean by that? As far as like obviously. I know panning is left and right, but I know when we're dealing with 5.1 and 7.1, you've got so many more options as far as directions to place things. Is that what you sort of mean when you talk about that scene?
Exactly. Yeah, it was conceived that the whole mix was conceived in 5.1. Obviously, it was then a down mix was done, but when it was conceived, we would place the elements in different places and like small groups of elements that then were regrouped in a bigger element and then moved in a different direction using the spectrum of the 5.1. No? Let's say the left and right, center, back, surround, left, surround, speakers. So we would use all of them in order to make this effect to work. So yeah, since it was in a 5.1 environment, I meant it that way, and then it would translate in a stereo in a different way, but it still worked.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, obviously, pandemic. Theaters are not. We're not as open. I did watch it at home on my home system, which is certainly not a up to snuff 5.1 system, but as close as I could get at my house. But definitely, still absolutely works. I do feel like this is one of those. If anyone did have the chance to watch it in a theater, I can only imagine how much more immersive it would have been. I mean, just so incredible.
I heard that they were gonna make a maybe by August or something. They were gonna also put it in the cinemas. I don't know if that's true, but
I
that would
think so.
be.
Well, the accolades that the film has received, I mean, you guys alone have, just won every award that is possible to win for this. So I have to imagine, that they'll try and, put it back out there and try and get more eyes on it. Because I think if you haven't had a chance to see it, you've probably heard something about it by this point. So I'm sure you want the chance to watch it. So that does make sense. So hopefully that happens. I would absolutely
Yes,
love for the opportunity to watch it in that better sound environment. So hopefully that happens.
yes,
Um,
hopefully, because that's how it was conceived, and I think it. I mean, even though the stereo mix is great, well, it's a different experience. So if it's out there, I would strongly suggest that you can catch it.
Absolutely. Oh yes, absolutely. Yes, for sure. In the way it was intended to be heard. Um, the other element that I wanted to ask, obviously, and you did kind of touch on the music being kind of late, I guess, when you guys had already started working on it. How does that work? I mean, obviously, there's so many elements that create the final mix. I mean, you have your production track, you have your dialogue, you've got Foley, you've got your music. I mean, so how did that sort of inform the story? Were there moments where was that from Darius or from the designer as far as like this is a more music heavy moment? Like how do you make those sort of decisions about what takes precedence in a scene? Is that who is that? Is that just the director's sort of vision, or are you guys? It does sound like you were allowed a lot of opportunities to just try things, and there are some moments where music is a little bit more heavy and present, and then there's times in which we don't hear a score, and so I was just curious, how that sort of works as far as like blending all of those elements.
That there was a lot of trial and error with the music because the music is not like the usual score. The bache, which is the main instrument that was used, the music was composed by Abe and Nicola. So they both blended all these elements, taking as a main character, let's say, as a main instrument, the bache, but also the processing of those elements and how to build the different structures of, let's say, the song in a particular scene was the first challenge. And once we got all those elements, we would have to decide when one element could come in or out, because it's, as I said before, it's not the traditional music where you have a melody or a harmony or even a rhythm. So we would have to decide which elements could do what in which moment in order to have an impact. So because it's sort of like a soundscape. I mean, I know this is a very reduced way to say it, but that helped us set the tone for whatever came before or after. And we had to be really subtle because we didn't want it to make it very how would you say, like, explicit. So we wanted to make it blend in such a way that it was part of the. At some points, it blends so well with ambiances, and some other points it's very very well understood. So it had to be really a matter of trying out things. There were even times that we had to re-edit the song in the mix stage because we said, no, this is still not what we're looking for. Darius that was one of the things we had to work a lot. I mean, once the ideas were established, because as I said, it was trial and error. Let's try with only these. Instead of using all the instruments, let's just use a third of the instruments. And sometimes it would work, and sometimes it was a mess. Sometimes it would be something that actually sometimes we tried it one day and the next day it wouldn't work. So yeah, it was an experiment.
I mean, which honestly sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, I can understand there's definitely probably some stress involved. I think you said you did the mix in 12 weeks. Is that correct?
Yeah, approximately 12 weeks. The first phase was, I think it was 7 weeks. And then the film was debuted in Toronto Film Festival. I believe that this was the first phase was in March and April of 2018, the first 6 weeks. And then it was released in Toronto Film Festival, and then they came back for another, I think it was, like 2 weeks and a half, and we did a lot of reconforming.
So you did work after it had gone to the festivals. You then did another sort of pass, so to speak.
And it was more reconforming,
Gotcha.
But there was still a lot of mixing. But and then there was another new version which we did I think it was January 2020. That was the last one, but those two phases were more into the editorial side, trying to preserve all what we had done and doing all the cuts according to the new film. So it took us a while to reconform that as well, and then that was the whole time we had. But in between,
is that normal to sort of to have that like second kind of go around? I mean, I sort of know it as like, oh, when picture is locked and the edit's done and the sound mix is done and it goes off to festivals, most likely the film is finished. But have you dealt with that before, of getting a project even after it's sort of, premiered or debuted anywhere, that actually, hold on, we're changing things in the edit, we're changing things? Has that happened before?
I've seen that it's becoming more common nowadays. I mean, honestly, now
Interesting.
I've seen. I mean, it's not the only film that I had this before, and I mean, and then it's especially after the debut. It's when they touch it once again, and even there are small touches, but it implies that you have to double check the whole picture. So
Sure.
it might be taking a few scenes out, or even maybe adding some new scenes in. But it's becoming more common. I've seen it. It wasn't as common before because I don't know if it's due to the digital uh, area that we have these tools that will allow us to do it that way. Because I guess with 35, it would be it would be harder. But even this film was filmed in 35, so I don't know. But I've seen it's becoming more common nowadays.
Well, I had to say, I mean, did you have a favorite? I mean, it doesn't even have to necessarily be a favorite scene, but was there something that about this movie that just specifically you're like, that for me was the coolest thing that I got to do, or whether it be if it was just a scene or if it was how a particular thing played out. What was your kind of favorite moment of working on this film?
I think my favorite scene, I do have one. It's when Ruben, the main character, starts playing the slide with the kid after they have to leave the classroom for whatever reason. And I think it was a very challenging scene in the sense that it had to have the power to connect them, but at the same time not to feel like it was just the effect, and at the same time so you can come back and forth of the subjective view of Ruben. So it was very challenging how to make it work, and also it had a lot to do with the editing. But once we established how it would sound, especially the first hits he makes in the slide, that you could perceive it, but you knew that it was this deformed version of his hearing. So, but at the same time that the kid reacts to this, and somehow they start connecting, and the rhythm of he starts playing makes them connect, and also the kid reacting to that. So it was very it had to be very subtle and very accurate to make it work, because if we would go to the effects side, I think it would really feel that it was not the proper elements for that scene. So to me, that was the most challenging. I spent with Nico like 3 days on that scene, so it was quite
Was
challenging.
that specifically trying to figure out the sound for what that hit on the slide would sound like to Ruben and the kid? Was that part of the challenge? Was creating that sort of sound?
The elements and the sound and the overall spacing as well, because even though it's not like a huge scene, and afterward it becomes a huge scene because you can tell that they're like as there's a zoom out and you see them, and it's all the elements from the ambiances. So how to get from one into the other that it would cut and work very precise. I think that was a challenging thing, to select which elements were useful, that they would sound naturalistic, but at the same time they were organic, and you could sense that as well without being this sense of effect. Uh-huh.
Yeah, no, I mean that's right. When they cut out to that wide shot and it cuts to what sounds to me like could be production track, like what it actually sounds like to hit a metal slide. Me as a person who can hear what it sounds like to me, just incredible. I love that the scene starts in with sort of Ruben and the kid's perception of what that feels like, what it sounds, what it sounds like, what it feels like to them, the vibrations, on the slide, and then we remind the audience at the end, like this is what they've been playing with. Yeah, that was a really powerful moment. And you're right, not the biggest of scenes, not but definitely, yeah, like really really honed in on the sort of experience that Ruben was having or that anyone who loses their hearing like that would have. But yeah, that's awesome. That was your favorite, because you're right. That is such an impactful. It's a really incredible scene, and it seems so minor. It seems like, oh, it's just a metallic thud. It's someone hitting a metal slide, but the fact that that's 3 days of work to create what just feels so organic and natural, it's a testament to the good work that you guys did.
Yeah, sometimes they ask me, how did you filter that? And it's like, no, I didn't filter that. It's a lot of sounds with those characteristics that make it work. But
Sure.
it's yeah, the tendency is to think that you just filter out and you're and you're done.
Yeah.
But it's a lot more than that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the accuracy of a lot of the elements helped us, that it's still natural and organic, because those are the recordings that we have. Those are the production sounds that we get, and from there we use them instead of doing all this processing. I mean, obviously sometimes we did some processing whenever it was needed, but for the most part we would use the elements, and I think that was also one of the high points, because we had elements that were really organic in that aspect, so they would work. And it was a challenge for me as well to get used to those sounds as well, because I would say, no, this won't work, but at the same time, coming and going in certain discussions with Nicolas specifically, we would try to make the concept work. And once I understood that, then I could move on and try to achieve what we were trying to get.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, and clearly based on the sort of accolades and awards that you guys have received, I think very much so audiences received what you put out, I think, in the intended way, because I think that this movie exists because of that relationship that it has with its sounds, and it's really incredible to see such good work recognized. So yeah, I mean, congratulations, definitely are deserved, because
Thank
yeah,
you.
and it
Thank
sounds
you.
like, I mean, yeah, you can feel the passion that you guys put into this. It absolutely reads on the screen and how we hear it. So definitely incredible. But I know you've got many projects ahead of you, so I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining me today. I had a ton of fun. This to me was incredibly informative, and like I said, congratulations to the whole team for, was it the CAS award, the Oscar, the BAFTA, and the AMPS. So just incredible wins. It's really, really great to see such hard work, recognized like this. It's very well deserved. So, but thank you so much for joining me. I really, really, this was fun. This was awesome.
Thank you. Really, I'm really honored to be an award winner, a CAS winner, because I never thought I would get to this point, and I really appreciate the society. So I'm really honored to be part of this.
Awesome. I mean, we're so grateful. I mean, that's the best part. I mean, this community of sound people, and it's great that it's like I said, I'm production. You're a re-recording mixer, but to get to have these conversations, that's what we're hoping, is to sort of shed light, so both sides can kind of learn a little bit more about what the other one does, and then in general just sort of share it. People are so interested to see how things are made, and so it's really great for you to share a little bit of your process and your knowledge, because I think this is stuff that people love to learn about how their favorite movies are made, and so this was really incredible. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for joining me today. If you guys loved this video, please consider liking it and subscribing to our channel. We are so excited to be bringing new content to you as often as we can. We just want to provide education and behind the scenes looks into the world of cinema and television sound. So thank you so much for watching.